What's the most awkward situation you've ever been in with a stranger? Hey guys, welcome back to the internet. I know you guys love cringe stories, so we've got a lot of those. I was adopted at birth. Learned who my birth family was in my early 30s. Had met a sister, but nobody else yet. Sister tells me grandpa is being taken off life support for cancer, and want to talk to me before he dies. Travel to hospital several hours away. Meet mom in hospital lobby for the first time ever. Go to grandpa's room where all of his and my family are. They are all there to say their goodbyes. Probably only 5% of them knew my existence. Suddenly, all the attention on me, the stranger. They have me kneel by his side, and he apologizes through the tears for pressuring my mom, that I just met, to give me away for adoption. People looked pretty shocked, including me. The experience was 1,000 emotions, and awkward was in there somewhere. Well, that's one way to be introduced to your family. I was at a wedding reception, and went to use the bathroom. I'm standing at the urinal, and this guy comes up and stands next to me and lets off some whopper farts. He goes, "Oof, check out the smell of these. Whew, you gotta let him out here and not by those girls. Know what I'm saying?" And I just go, yep, and walk out. Felt very uncomfortable. Hey, I mean, if you can't fart in the bathroom, where can you fart? So I worked the entrance gate for a theme park. Our season pass holders used a biometric scan of their right index finger to verify their identity. One day a little girl walks up with her family, who all spoke Spanish. Scans her pass and places her left finger on the scanner. I say, "Can you use your right finger, sweetie?" Then her mother raises the girl's right arm to show me she doesn't actually have a right hand. Seemed to be due to a birth defect rather than a horrific accident. However, her left finger kept getting rejected, so I called a lead over to override the old scan and redo it. He then proceeded to say the same thing to the girl, followed by her mother raising the arm again. It was definitely more awkward for me than the family, but it gets worse. About 3 months later it happened again, the same girl. Absolutely mortifying. It's like you see the little girl coming and you're just like, don't stare, don't look at it, don't pay any attention, don't acknowledge it, and then you're like, now I have to acknowledge it. So I'm a pediatric nurse, but we float, or substitute, to other floors when we have more nurses than we need. So I was sent to an adult floor to work as an assistant, since theirs had called in sick. An older male patient called out asking for help to get to the bathroom. He stood, tried to pivot, and the newly operated on knee gave out. All 320 pounds of him came down on top of me, and we laid there for almost an hour. I had closed the door for privacy, and neither he nor I could yell loud enough, nor reach the call light for help. My phone was 10 feet from me on the floor after it fell out of my scrubs and rang incessantly. Finally, the other assistant came to find me because she wanted to go on break and was tired of having to do all my work. The patient was fine since he fell on me. I was sore for a week. We were nose to nose the whole time, and boy, it was awkward. His breath was terrible, but he was a nice man and felt so bad. No, there was no boner. I thought it was bad being, squished up against somebody in an elevator for a long time, but with them just, laying right on top of you, it really can't get worse than that. So I discovered, whilst at the top of St. Paul's Cathedral, that I am terrified of heights. A Norwegian woman was having the same experience. We were so unnerved, we ended up holding one another and bumping down the spiral staircase on our backsides. Parted ways at the bottom without a word or a backward glance. Oh, you should have stayed friends. It sounds like a fun bonding experience. So once I was at a dog groomer's to pick up my dog. It's fairly small, 20 pounds, and white. Usually when I take him, he's got long, semi-curly hair, and when I pick him up, he has short, straight hair, which is quite a change, and this is what I expect when I go to pick him up. I walk to the counter and request my dog, and the clerk tells me he'll be out in a moment. 30 seconds later, an attendant walks out to the lobby from the back door with a dog that immediately gets excited and tries to run away as soon as it rounds the corner to me. "Hey buddy," I say as I walk up and attempt to pick up my dog. But it turns around and starts recoiling back and gives me the nip as I try to pick him up. An old man behind me asks, "Hey, is that your dog?" And me, thinking it's a pretty weird question, respond, "Yep." At that point he goes, "I don't think so, mister. That's my dog." And as I turn and realize this dog that looks just like mine after a grooming is 100% not my dog, my face goes completely red and the whole lobby starts laughing. To make it worse, the old couple whose dog it was stuck around just because they wanted to see what my dog actually looked like. And of course when he came out with a different haircut, there was only a vague resemblance. Yikes. Yeah, there's really no recovering from this one. Just, go home, go to bed, and try to forget the whole thing. So I serve in the Air Force, and one time I got injured at work and had to go to the hospital. Nothing serious, just dinged my finger super hard. Messed up the ligament, my finger was shaped like an N. Anywho, when I get to the hospital, I walk in the front door, and I'm still in uniform. And some nice older man comes up to me and thanks me for my service. I told him I appreciated his support, and then he abruptly asked me if I was married. I told him no, and right at the moment, he turns to this woman walking by, heading for the door. He turned to her and says something along the lines of, "You see this nice man? You should go on a date with him." At first I thought maybe he knew the woman, maybe his daughter or something, but the shocked look on her face, I could easily tell he did not know her. She stopped for a moment, and he asked her again, and she just went wide-eyed, kind of stuttering for a moment, and then beelined it for the door. I really didn't know what to say, so I just stood there looking like a guy who just got whacked in the head. The old man then turns his back to me and says, "Let's see who else is here and available." At this point, I just made some excuse about being late for my appointment and walked away. I don't know if I've ever been so red before or again in my life. Yeah, if only getting a date was as easy as just, "Oh hey, there's a pretty woman, let's go out." Sounds like a fun encounter between three strangers. So I was with my mom buying flowers at a florist for a New Year's Eve party. The florist was obviously a very lonely woman, and wouldn't stop going on about how she isn't doing anything for New Year's, and how it's so nice we have friends to visit, to the point where it became really saddening. My mother obviously really felt for her. Every now and again, maybe twice a year, she had a brain fart and accidentally said what she was thinking. That day was one of those rare days. After paying for the flowers, my mom says, "Thanks, hope you find a friend soon." I look at her in shock. The woman looks at her in shock, and my mom just gasps, apologizes, and literally backs out of the store. Man, it was so awkward. It's like, yeah, good luck on your boring, pointless life. That time I screamed at a woman over poo. My little village has a small annual dog show. We normally enter our little dog, who has won friendliest dog, waggiest tail, and dog the judge would like to take home in the past. This year she was unfortunately in season, so we didn't enter to prevent any fuss from the other dogs, but took her along to watch. Halfway across the park, she decided to poo, and I suddenly realized I'd forgotten a bag. There were loads of other people with dogs around due to the show, so I wandered away a little to ask someone for a bag. I turned back, and to my horror, a lady was picking up my little dog's mess. Not wanting to feel like one of those a-holes that doesn't clean up, I ran towards her to advise her that she didn't have to do that because I was going to get it. Instead, in sort of a panic, I waved my arms and barked, "No, that's my poo!" Please note that I did not say, "That's my dog's poo." She physically jumped and then turned deep red. She sort of mumbled an apology, dropped the poo, and marched off with her dog. It was at that point that I looked to my left and saw my dog's poo sitting a few feet away from the lady's dog's mess that she was attempting to pick up. I think about this at night sometimes. Man, imagine this from the other person's view. They're with their dog poops, and like, oh, time to clean it up, and somebody just comes yelling at you like, "No, that's my poo!" And you're like, "Okay, sorry, you can have it." Like probably many stories on this sub, this happened at a huddle house. My girlfriend, now wife, and I were eating with some friends, and I decided I needed to go to the bathroom. I got up, walked over to it, and tried the door. It was open, so I walked right on in. The room was pretty big, urinal and sink on one side, toilet on the opposite side. There was a guy in there at the urinal, and he gave me a really strange look when I walked in. So I went over to the toilet, had a pee, and started actually processing my situation. That guy looked at me like I was really out of place. This toilet I'm using isn't in a separate stall. Not much privacy here. Oh no, this is a single-person bathroom. By this point, the guy had hastily run out after finishing his business. I took care of my own affairs and had to do the walk of shame past him as I walked back to my table. I told my girlfriend later that night, completely mortified. She thought it was hilarious. The look he gave me when I walked in still is burned in my mind. Well, maybe he should have locked the door. Man, one-person bathrooms in public places are so terrible. At an art studio in LA, my girlfriend was wearing a denim jacket. As we looked at a piece together, out of the corner of my eye, I saw the jacket and I reached over to grab her butt. A sudden, "Oh!" comes from behind me, and a woman 30 years older than me is standing there blushing. I tell her I thought she was someone else and run away to my girlfriend. A few minutes later, the lady comes and finds us to talk about young love and how cute we are while making too much eye contact with me. Well, at least it doesn't sound like she was too offended by the whole thing. My son had small Toy Story figurines, but wanted big ones for Christmas. I walked into Toys R Us and asked the male clerk, "Do you have a large Woody?" He turned bright red. I wheeled around and marched out and didn't go back for months. I mean, if he was blushing by that question, maybe he was trying to hide it at the time. So in the cinema, I interlocked fingers with the kid sitting beside me for a full minute. Turns out, he wasn't my kid. Well, again, it sounds like they weren't too offended, or they were just too shy to say anything about it. But how do you forget who's sitting on each side of you at a movie theater? When I was a teenager, my friends and I would spend the weekends staying up late playing video games and eating junk food. I was also a cross-country runner, and on this particular night, I was experiencing some extreme chafing from a long run earlier that day. While we were at the gas station getting Doritos and energy drinks, I announced to who I thought was my friend, "Man, my nipples really hurt." Upon realizing it was a complete stranger with whom I had just shared this intimate detail, I simply stared at him and said, "You're not my friend," and walked away. I didn't go back to that gas station for a long time. Edit. I'm a guy, for those wondering. Well, I guess that's probably a little less awkward for a guy doing that. So my wife and I went to Europe for our honeymoon. We were in the train station in Amsterdam, and I had to use the bathroom. I walked into the toilet stall and saw there was a teepee in the bowl, but didn't think anything of it. I did my business, and when I tried to flush, it didn't go down. In a panic, I flushed again, and this only resulted in water becoming dangerously close to the rim of the bowl. I said F it and started to leave. However, right outside the stall was a bathroom attendant. He looked over at me and started yelling at me, asking why I was clogging up the toilet. He was blocking me from leaving, and all these other people in the bathroom just looked in at us. Man, it was so embarrassing I wanted to die. I eventually muttered sorry and brushed past him and ran out the bathroom. Man, what kind of place has someone that stands in the bathroom and calls you out if you clog the toilet? Every time I casually talk to a stranger, say bye, then we end up needing to walk the same way for a while. He was like, alright, see ya, bye. Bye, alright, see ya, bye. At the airport, I walk up as the elevator door is closing, and there is a woman inside with a stroller. I slowed down because I wasn't in a hurry and would rather catch the next one. Then I saw a little girl, about 2 or 3, is playing in a flower pot thing nearby. I realized she was likely meant to be on the elevator with her mom, but the doors are closed by the time I put it together. I walk up to her and said, "Did your mommy get in the elevator?" She just shyly smiles. I sit down with her and decide to wait in place for a few minutes for the mom to realize. A minute or two later, a man walks up and says, "Excuse me, can I have child?" in a thick Russian-y accent. I was trying to decide what to ask to figure out if she was his kid, when the elevator door reopened and the woman came flying out yelling for the girl. She hops up happily and runs over to the mom. I stared at the guy with an accusing look. Then he turned and got into the elevator too. I don't know what the heck was going on there. Was he with them? Did he think I was trying to take their kid? Was he a creeper following them? So awkward. I literally sat silent through the whole weird encounter. I mean, how exactly do you respond to somebody just coming up and says, "Excuse me, can I have child?" It's like, oh no, sorry, this isn't mine, I'm just holding it for someone. I got on an elevator with a woman, and she had on these really nice boots, so I complimented them by saying, "Nice boots." She cups her breasts and says, "Well, you're not shy. Thank you, they're real." And then immediately realized I said boots. She thought I said, "Nice boobs." Longest elevator ride ever. To this day, whenever I say boots in any context, I do so with a very hard, deliberate T. Yeah, that's a bit of a risky compliment to throw out there. So it was my first time voting in a presidential election in 2016 since becoming old enough to do so. And polling place was at a library. When I get to the front of the line and start filling out the required papers, I mention it's my first time and what to do next. After hearing this, the woman who was working there and helping me raised her voice and said, "Hey everyone, we've got a first-time voter here," and started clapping so they would all clap as well. Nobody clapped, and I was just standing there really embarrassed before quietly saying, "Can I just go vote now?" I mean, who cares if you're like a first-time voter? It's not like you even do it that many times in your life. So I was in a movie theater with my brother. We were watching Pacific Rim. During the action scenes, he had to, quote, "fart like a mother effer." So he waited until the music was at its loudest to be inconspicuous. The second he lifts his butt cheeks and begins, the music stops, and all everyone can hear in the movie theater is a giant foghorn of a fart. Imagine the music in action scenes. How it builds and builds, then has a moment of silence for a bit more drama. Then a freaking shart-sounded fart takes it over. The reactions from people in the theaters were laughter, WTFs, and wow, really? We were laughing so bad we were crying. See, I think the moral of a lot of these stories is just wait till you get home to fart. So I worked at Old Navy, and some lady was looking at men's shirts, and she stopped me and held up this shirt and asked if I thought it would fit her son. I looked around and no one else was around. We stood in silence for maybe 30 seconds before she started laughing and said, "Oh, haha, you don't know my son, he lives in Michigan." We were in Washington State. "Never mind, I'm just stoned, haha." And then she went and bought the shirt. I mean, this all just sounds like a normal encounter with a stoned person. A woman at a gas station didn't know how to put air in her tires, so I helped her because I wanted to put air in my tires and didn't want to wait all day to do it. She called her husband on speakerphone to let him know that she found some nice man to help her air her tires. Then I hear him call her an idiot and say that I'm only helping her because I want to F her, and where does she get off talking to other men? She stammered and tried to explain that nothing was going on between us. After she got off the phone, she just looked at me as if her husband just caught her effing me and got in the car and left. No thank you, no nothing. And for some reason I felt guilty for even helping her out. Man, I feel awkward just thinking about it. Some people are just messed up, it's not your problem. The most awkward moment of my life thus far was with the stranger. I was in Quebec airport going through customs with my family. Because some of the recent changes to their system didn't have everyone in a line, but instead in a large pen where they would release about 50 people at a time. It was all chaos. When my family is at the front, they release us and everyone is running forward in a mass trying to get to the kiosks. Next to me is a tall Swedish man trying to get his family a kiosk. He is running forward and waving his arm behind him in a "come on" motion, clearly frantic. Well, somehow the worlds aligned where his middle and pointer finger went perfectly into my 2 nose holes. Perfectly, as he then ripped his arm upward to motion his family forward. My nose was also ripped forward, and I immediately began bleeding, everywhere. He looked at me in horror. My family looked at me in frustration as we needed to get to a kiosk, and the customs agent looked at me in bewilderment. The language barriers made the situation all the more awkward. How do you point somewhere and accidentally just rip somebody's nose off? Oopsie. So I worked security at an aquatic theme park and was watching Jeopardy in the employee entrance. One of the veterinarians came through and watched it with me for a bit. He said he watches it religiously and he'd passed the test for the show and was hoping to get selected. He'd heard that they like to have a diverse group of contestants, and they hadn't had a black guy for a while, so he liked his chances. A few days later, there are 2 black contestants, so when I see him leaving the next time, I say, "Hey, did you catch Jeopardy last week?" "No, why?" he responds. "There were 2 black guys on it," I exclaim. He just stares at me blankly for a few seconds and walks off. That's when I realized it was a different gentleman that I had the previous conversation with. Yeah, that's a bit of a weird thing to say out of context. Well, that's all of the stories I've got. That was quite a lot of them. I hope you guys experienced things almost as awkward as this, just so you can know what it's like. And if you really enjoy awkward cringe comedy like this, I highly recommend watching the show The Increasingly Poor Decisions of Todd Margaret. It's a pretty short series on Netflix, but it's probably one of the funniest shows I've ever seen. I've watched it at least a dozen times now. Anyways, I'm gonna go take a video of the cat now, so thanks for watching.